At 7 in the morning, police officers, a SWAT team, and other federal agents wake 4 individuals up, handcuff them, and place them in their garage. And for the next 2-3 hours, officers are executing a search warrant in this residence. In the meantime, an INS officer is questioning these 4 individuals about their immigration status. 3 questions become obvious. Can law enforcement detain individuals while executing a search warrant? Can they detain those people in handcuffs, or is that excessive? And finally, can they question these people about their immigration status? Before we go on, I want to thank you for watching me here on YouTube. If you're new to the LAWSTACHE channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to LAWSTACHE.com and check out some of the merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts. Thanks for watching.
Quick message from LAWSTACHE. Are you charged with a crime? Or do you want to know your rights if stopped by police? Watch California attorney Anton Vieltsin discuss legal cases from the Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit, and California state courts on the LAWSTACHE YouTube page. Anton has handled hundreds of federal and state criminal cases, has an in-depth knowledge of the law, and has the best mustache ever. Subscribe to the LAWSTACHE YouTube page. That's LAWSTACHE.
Today we're discussing a Supreme Court case, Mueller versus Mena, and the facts of the case are pretty straightforward. Officers are investigating a drive-by shooting. They believe a certain gang is involved. They obtain enough information to have probable cause to search a home, so they obtain a valid warrant to search a particular residence. 7 a.m., they go to this house. They go through the front door, enter the bedrooms. There's a bunch of officers, including a SWAT team. All of them have police written on their vests. At gunpoint, they enter Mena's bedroom. They get her out of the bedroom. They handcuff her and 3 other individuals, walk them to the garage, and for the next 2-3 hours, they spent in the garage waiting for other officers to execute this warrant. The officers are specifically looking for weapons and evidence of gang membership. Now, the 4 individuals inside the garage were allowed to move around inside the garage, but couldn't leave. And of course, they were handcuffed the whole 2-3 hours. In the meantime, an officer from the INS was also questioning these 4 people about their immigration status. Now, Ms. Mena files a 1983 lawsuit saying that her 4th Amendment rights were violated. Remember, the 4th Amendment protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. Ms. Mena specifically says that her 4th Amendment rights were violated because the detention was unreasonable in terms of duration and in terms of matter, meaning that it is not proper for her to be sitting in the garage for 2-3 hours, and she shouldn't have been in handcuffs all that time. She also says that her 4th Amendment rights were violated when the INS officer was questioning her about her immigration status. In Michigan versus Summers, the Supreme Court held that officers executing a search warrant for contraband have the authority to detain the occupants of the premises while a proper search is conducted. Such detentions are appropriate, said the Supreme Court, because the character of the additional intrusion caused by detention is slight, and because the justifications for detention are substantial. The Supreme Court made clear that the detention of an occupant is surely less intrusive than the search itself, and the presence of a warrant assures that a neutral magistrate has determined that probable cause exists to search the home. Against this incremental intrusion, the Supreme Court posed 3 legitimate law enforcement interests that provide substantial justification for detaining an occupant. Number 1, preventing flight in the event that incriminating evidence is found. Number 2, minimizing the risk of harm to officers. And 3, facilitating the orderly completion of the search, as detainees' self-interest may induce them to open locked doors or locked containers to avoid the use of force. So under Michigan versus Summers, detention is permissible. And the Supreme Court goes even further. They say that detention is categorical, meaning that law enforcement do not need to have justification to detain an individual while executing a warrant. So, in this situation, law enforcement could in fact detain Miss Mena. But what about handcuffs? Well, the Supreme Court says that in order to effectuate detention, reasonable force can be used. And so the Supreme Court says handcuffing an individual while detained is permissible also. But they again go even further. They say, especially in this case, where law enforcement are looking for weapons and membership in a gang, meaning that law enforcement could ahead of time believe that these individuals were armed and dangerous. And by the way, the timing of it all, 2-3 hours, the Supreme Court says, is also permissible in terms of detention. That is because the government's interests outweigh the individual's liberty concerns or liberty rights. Now, you might not agree with this, but that's what the Supreme Court says. So, anytime law enforcement are executing a warrant, even if you're not suspected of a crime, even if you're just there being at the wrong place at the wrong time, you can be detained while law enforcement are executing a warrant. You can also be handcuffed in most situations. But what about questioning about immigration? Supreme Court says that officers do not need to have reasonable suspicion in order to question an individual about their name, date of birth, and place of birth, meaning immigration status. But here's a tip to you. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to be silent and not to incriminate yourself. Use that right. I know it is difficult to remain silent for 2-3 hours, but remember, those 2-3 hours, law enforcement are surrounding you on purpose. They're trying to listen in, they're taking notes, and anything you say might be used against you later on in trial. So remain silent, as difficult as it gets. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the LAWSTACHE channel, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star review rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to LAWSTACHE.com and check out some of the merch. Thanks for watching.